So anyway, my name's Shawn Barber. I'm co-owner of Companion Tea and Companion Coffee, and we are a Berlin-based coffee and tea company. We opened in 2013. Got a great slide here. I'll just look at them. um, and yeah, I'm here to talk to you guys today about tea. And I feel a little bit nervous coming into such a coffee-heavy thing and being the one guy who's talking about tea. But I think there's a lot of reasons to be excited about tea. I'm really excited about tea. Uh, and I think, yeah, my whole point of being here today is hopefully at the end that also you guys are a little bit more excited about tea. And yeah. So, sorry, I'm a little distracted. So yeah, so there's a lot of reasons to be excited about tea. From a business point of view, I think that we spend so much time in the coffee industry worrying about where our coffee comes from, how the coffee's been sourced, how it's been roasted and prepared. There's a little bit of a lack of continuity when we don't have that sort of chain of quality and ethics through all of the products that we serve. And I think it's a huge reason why if you are working in a shop or you own a shop, that you should take a look at all the things that you have and make sure that you have that continuity. I know for us, when we started serving tea in the cafe, it really changed things a lot and people really responded positively to it. And I think it gives a lot more authenticity to what you're doing as a business if you kind of carry that through. And as a barista, I think a reason to get excited about making better tea is because making bad tea really sucks. It just does. And it doesn't suck because it's a lot of work to make bad tea. It doesn't suck because it takes a lot of time. But it really sucks because we put so much work as baristas into the skill that we have. And we put so much strain on ourselves to be standing behind a bar, preparing drinks for people and doing the best that we can. And oftentimes baristas go a little unappreciated. And for all the hard work we do, one of the biggest signs of appreciation that we get is when the customer buys something and really appreciates the work that we've put into it. And when you serve someone really bad tea, it doesn't require any of that skill from you. It's kind of like selling someone a packet of Haribos at a convenience store or something. It's just an exchange. And so for me, it was kind of those two reasons that we decided that we wanted to get into tea originally. And so when we opened the cafe, we started looking around for quality tea. And we found some pretty good tea, but we couldn't find tea where the vendors or the merchants were giving us the information about how the tea was processed, about where the tea was from exactly, and about when it was harvested. And this is a huge problem in the tea industry, and something that hopefully will change in the coming years. And it's because tea is grown here and it's produced here. And in some really, really high quality places, tea is grown and produced in the same spot. And when a tea merchant like myself purchases tea, we purchase it as a finished product. So you can sort of say that the grower is one person and that the producer, which may also be the grower, is sort of the coffee roaster of the tea world. How he makes the tea, he or she, and how they process it has a huge effect on how the tea tastes. And when you buy it as a finished product. And as a merchant, your role is to present the tea and to give people information on it. But a lot of people are not paying good amounts for their tea. A lot of people are just insecure about losing their contacts. So what merchants will do is they'll buy tea and they'll sell it to someone else. And they'll change the name and they'll sell it again. And by the time it comes to you, it's got some swanky name like Midnight Black, and it's like 4 different teas that have been blended together and sitting around for a few years. And so this is the problem in tea, and this is the reason why we don't have a lot of transparency in the tea world. So we were looking for tea, and we couldn't find something that had those things. And so our idea was to travel to India as a starting point, and to kind of have a look around and see if we could find out what was going on in the tea world, and see if we could connect with some small growers where we could get some tea that sort of had that information. So I booked a trip to India, and it was kind of a fake it until you make it sort of thing, because I didn't really know what I was doing. And I arrived in India, and I'd kind of arranged to meet a whole slew of people. And one of the first people that I was supposed to meet was a man named Rajiv in a town called Siliguri. And I arrived from the airport at about 10:30 in the morning to meet this guy, and arrived at the hotel, and the concierge came rushing out, and he said, like, "Oh, everybody's late. We need you to like run upstairs and, you know, get properly dressed and meet in the conference room." And I had no idea what this guy was talking about. This conference room, getting dressed. I didn't have anything. I had like a crappy t-shirt. So I went up and I kind of splashed some water on my face and went into the conference room. And it was a room about this size with 2 large conference tables at either side with about 20 seats on each. The room was full of television cameras and men in suits. And at the front of the room there was a table with 6 name placards and microphones. And one of them was mine. And don't talk in front of people a lot, so this was like really a shock, and I was also a little bit nervous about it. And so I sat down, and all of these people were coming over and shaking my hand and saying, "Mr. Barber, you're from Germany," and I don't even speak German, but they'd all practiced, and they were like, "Guten Tag," and throwing out some things like that. And yeah, I had no idea what was going on, and they were telling me how many tons of CTC they export every year. And next thing I know, Rajiv walks in through the door. I'd actually never met him in person. And we sit down, and this meeting just begins. And it turned out through the course of the meeting that it was a meeting of the India Tea Board. So all of these people were all of the men who own basically the entire tea industry in India. And what I didn't know before that meeting, and what I know now, is that the industry there is kind of on a decline. And I could talk about that a lot more, but for the sake of brevity, Rajiv's take on the situation was that if they changed legislation, or if larger farmers would set aside a small section of their farm to grow higher quality tea, it would breathe a little bit of vitality back into the Indian tea industry. And by the time it was my turn to speak, I kind of knew what was going on, and I didn't feel like I was saying anything untrue by saying that it was those types of teas that I was looking for, these kinds of specialty teas, and that I was from Germany, and that I was interested in buying tea. And so I don't know how much effect that meeting actually had, but at the end of the meeting, there was a group of people in the back of the room who didn't have seats, who were just there watching, and they came up and introduced themselves to me afterwards. And they were about 13 small tea growers from Nepal and from India, and they introduced themselves to me and explained that they're making these kinds of teas, but that it's impossible for people to buy from them. And when they make a really good quality tea, people want to pay such a low price that it's just an unsustainable business. And they asked me, you know, how long I was going to be in India and what my plan was. And when I told them where I was visiting, they all laughed at me, and they were like, "That's ridiculous. Cancel your plans, and we'll go and we'll show you all of our farms." And that's how our business started. So yeah, this is one of those small farms that we visited. This is in Meghalaya, India. This is a biodynamic farm that just nobody really knows about. It's a really, really cool place. You can see the tea starts here and goes up there. There's some shade trees. Yeah. So that was kind of how it all started. And since that time, we've continued to work with all 13 of these farmers. Some of them don't have the quality and the hygiene that we can import their teas yet. And for those farmers, we're helping them apply for government grants so that they can get better equipment to start producing tea. But all of them we keep in touch with, and all of them I visit their farms every year. And yeah, and so that's kind of how it all started. And yeah, and so I was excited about tea. Obviously, a trip like that is going to change your perception of a product. But it wasn't until I got home to Berlin and I was tasting through all the tea samples with my business partner, Chris, that I really got excited about tea. And I realized the reason why I was excited about tea is not because it made sense as a business or because bad tea sucks to make as a barista. But the reason was because it's a super interesting culinary field. There's such a range of flavors and diversities, and it's got so much overlap into the coffee world. It just makes so much sense, and it's so interesting. It's very similar to things like natural wine or beer that we all get into. That range totally exists with tea. And it's super exciting, and it made me feel really heavy as someone who's now in the tea industry, that it's a responsibility to take on to change the way that we speak about tea and to educate people more on how tea is processed and how we understand tea. I talk to heaps of people and ask them if they like tea, and they always tell me, yeah, I got this good tea once from this one guy who knew a person who had it. And I'm like, that's great, but where do you buy tea? And a lot of people, even in our industry, don't really know, because they have had a good tea somewhere, but nobody's explained to them how that tea is processed and how they can find more of it. So we're going to taste some tea. I'm not going to take that much more time. But before we taste some tea, I'm just going to explain to you some basics of how tea is produced. Some of you may already know, just bear with me, because the tasting that we're going to do afterwards doesn't really make sense if you don't know how tea is processed. So this is a tea leaf from that same farm I just showed you a picture of. The top little shoot there is a bud, and then there's two leaves. So the picking standard of this is a bud and two leaf, which is a very common hand-picked standard of high-quality tea. You might also see a bud and one leaf, or just the bud, which would often be called a needle tea, like a silver needle or a golden needle. At a farm like this one, they'll pick these teas and they'll process that tea into green tea, white tea, oolong tea, and black tea, all from the same plant, all from the same time of year, all from the same farm. So the only difference in those teas is how it's processed. This is really a little crude, but so all of it starts with fresh tea leaves, and all of it's withered. Withering is the process in tea where you reduce the moisture content of the leaf. So you pick the leaf, and you can, oftentimes people will put it out on mesh trays and pass air through it. You can go with cold air, you can heat the air, you can put it out in the sun, and you can sun wither. There's many different ways, but basically reducing the moisture content of the leaf makes the leaves malleable, and it allows you to further process them. Green tea is shortly withered, and then it's fixed, or sometimes the process is called kill green. And basically the leaves are flash heated, and that kills the enzymes that allow for oxidization inside the tea leaf. So it's flash heated, and then it'll be processed in whatever way, rolled or just straight up dried. That's green tea. White tea is kind of the most pure. It's picked, and then it's withered, and then it's dried. And it's dried fairly quickly after the withering process is complete. And it's quick enough that no oxidization starts to take place. So a white tea that's been processed really, really quickly will still look very green in appearance. Oolong is probably the most misunderstood category of tea. In a lot of countries where oolong is produced and where it has a long history, if you were to order an oolong, you would specify the type of oolong that you're having, and that would allow you to understand how it's processed. But basically, an oolong is withered, and then instead of being fixed or dried right away, it's allowed to oxidize. Oftentimes, it's rolled or bruised, and oxidization is just basically like, imagine a piece of spinach. If you roll it or if you bruise it, the spinach starts to change color. It gets darker. And it's basically the same thing with tea. The rolling and bruising speeds up oxidization. And once a certain percentage of the leaf is bruised, then they'll fix it like they do with green tea and dry it. Black tea is just when 85% of the leaf is oxidized. So oolong is really everything in between white tea and black tea. No matter how you process it, no matter what you do to it, it's an oolong. Yeah, so we're going to taste some teas right now. I've brought 4 teas. They're all from Nepal, and they're from 2 different farms. And so the first 2, one is a white tea, and kind of soft, kind of creamy. And the second tea, the White Forest, is that exact same leaves from the exact same farm that we processed 1 week after the white tea. And instead of just straight up drying them, we very quickly rolled them. And we did that to make it more durable for shipping, and also to make it smaller so that we could fit more in a package, be more affordable for the end customer. But basically, you have a very, very pure Bai Mudan style white tea, and then next to it you have a sort of modern tea that's sort of an intensified version. And then the second set of teas is from another Nepalese farm that we work with. One of them is oxidized about 75%. It's styled after what a Darjeeling tea would have been like about 50 years ago. It's very light and kind of fruity. And the next tea is, again, the very same leaves, but fully oxidized and made into a black tea. So, yeah. So we're going to go back and taste them. I got to put this up. We were super lucky. When originally I planned to do this, I thought it was going to be a much smaller group and that I was going to make everybody here tea. And then I realized that it wasn't. And I spoke to Isa and Hannah, and we were really, really lucky to get sponsored by this teaware from these guys. And if anyone's here from CAFO, thank you so much for hooking us up with this stuff. These are the 4 teas. There's brewing instructions and information on these teas on the table. So we're going to break down into our teams. Everyone's going to go to your table. There's a small sheet on there with a write-up on the teas. And there's a couple of things on the table. So I want you to start brewing with the black tea because it's the hottest. And by the time you finish brewing all of them, hopefully there'll be a more stable temperature. So the black tea, the tea's already pre-weighed. So you're just going to pop it in the brewer and brew it up. And then for these other teas, we want them to be different temperatures, and to kind of hack that so it would be really easy, we figured out how much cold water we need to add to get the right temperature. So there's a scale on your table. So someone from your team just pop the brewer on the scale. And for the dark oolong, which is called the Jun Chiabari, just throw 20 grams of cold water in it, and et cetera, for the other ones. Yeah. There's timers there. Maybe you guys can use your phone for timers. Once the tea is brewed, you're going to take the little strainer out and dump the tea leaves into the cup that they're in now. And that's going to be a really important part of tasting, to kind of grab that cup and jam it up into your nose and smell the leaves. It gives you a really good idea of what the tea is going to taste like. And then once all the teas are brewed, there's cups there. Grab a cup, put just a small sip of one of the teas into your cup and have a slurp, and just go through it like you would a cupping. Does that make sense? Anyone have any questions about the brewing before we?
I do.
Yeah.
Is that 20 grams cold and then just filling it up with the hot and then
Yeah, precisely. So with this one, yeah, just fill it right up to the. You'll see this in a second that the brewer's sort of bottleneck. So just fill it up to that neck like it's a line, and all the other ones, yeah, fill to the neck. Let's do it.